Steve coming tonight or no?
So his father-in-law is in the hospice.
Sorry to hear that. Set?
All set.
I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Village Planning Commission of Almont for February 1st, 2024 to order, please. May I have a roll call?
Tedeschi,
Here.
Meek,
Here.
Zender,
Here.
Schneider, Dyke,
Present.
Carl,
Here.
Miller.
Here. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is communications. Kim, do we have any kind of communications of any kind? No?
Sir.
Okay. Next item is the approval of the agenda. Unless there are any changes or alterations, I would accept a motion to approve the agenda as it's presented.
So moved.
I have a
Second.
motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of January 4th, 2024. They were included in your packet of information, and unless there are any changes or alterations, I would accept a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a
Support.
second?
Support.
I have a support. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. We have nobody in the audience tonight, so there are no public comments. Tonight, we have no public hearings, and we have no new business this evening. The next item on the agenda is unfinished business master plan. And before we get started, I wanted to, in my own opinion, but maybe I'm speaking for the rest of the members, I want to thank Caitlin for the open house. I thought it was very well done, and it was very, very informative. So I want to thank you very much.
A good job.
It was a good job. Really, really good. Now I will let you inform us of where we go from here.
Sure. So you received in the previous to today, there's the majority of the packet. So most of the master plan we've already reviewed specifically up to this meeting. So this is kind of a pre-public hearing draft. So if we are comfortable tonight, at the end, one of our options would be is that we would make a motion to authorize the village council to authorize the public hearing. So we cannot do that ourselves. We have to go to the village council to ask for that. So we don't have to make that decision if we have a round of edits or things of that nature, but that's the next step in the process. And then once we do that, then we go into public hearing phase. And there's a 63-day waiting period.
63.
63.
So would that, if we made, let's follow that for just a second. So if we made that recommendation to council tonight to go ahead and authorize a public hearing, then is it at their do we then have to wait 63 days or is it shorter than that?
So if they did that, we could make the February 20th council agenda. Is that accurate? Okay. And then we have to send the notices, and then the 63-day timer starts.
So we were looking at what then, April?
So
Approximately, just so I get an
more
idea.
closer to May.
Closer to May.
Yep,
Okay.
closer
All
to
right.
May. Because we probably would have had the notices actually out by the end of February.
Okay.
And so that would be probably even sooner because you don't have to mail it because you just walk it to their mailbox. One of the parties is the township we send it to. So that's not difficult to communicate with. But that would be my more or less thought. And then,
So then after the public hearing, the council does not approve it at that meeting, correct?
correct.
Now, can they do that at their next meeting?
No.
No.
So the planning commission holds the public hearing. We're required to.
Okay,
And then we actually make adoption to adopt our master plan.
okay,
And then there will be a sample resolution when we go to the February council meeting with the authorization of the public hearing. If the village council would like to adopt the master plan as well, So then you would have two parties adopt. They don't have to. The planning commission can just adopt it. Historically, we've always had the village council also adopt it.
The adoption comes after the 63-day period though, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, so we hold the
Gotcha.
public hearing,
Yep.
this body will approve it, and then it goes to the council and they approve it. One thing that I'll note, and especially during our joint March training, is once the planning commission adopts it and sends it to council, council can't make changes.
Cannot.
Nope.
Okay.
The planning commission is the gatekeeper of the master plan. And so if they suggest changes, then it has to come back here for us to consider as the planning commission, and then we can either agree or disagree and then adopt it, and then council
Oh,
can choose to
Very
adopt
good.
it. So,
Wow, we have,
Don't need
a-
for
Would it be-
another
would-
public
would
hearing.
it be,
Correct.
would it be wise to email council a PDF copy of the master plan prior to the public hearing? So if they have, and letting them know that if you have suggested changes, this is when it should be done.
yes, so my tentative timeline, depending how our discussion goes tonight, if we are comfortable, I'm assuming there might be a few minor tweaks that we do tonight.
Mhm.
My goal would be is to make those changes first thing Monday, Tuesday, send it then to the township and the, not the township, to the council. So then you'd have a few weeks to digest it before the 20th, not just the week.
Awesome.
So try to give you a little bit more time to review
So-
that.
council has not seen this draft.
No.
Okay, all right. Okay,
So the first section, I was gonna go more or less chronologically. So that way, as we flip through, if there's any, I'll stop at each chapter, in case when you were studying it at home, if you saw any changes or had some questions, we could make sure that we addressed it as a group.
okay.
So the first portion that's super important is the credit page. So please, everyone, make sure your name is spelled correctly. I hate to get to the public hearing draft and go, oops, with a little typo. Okay.
I think Peter Feldman is not to Peter Feldman.
Oh, shoot. I knew there could be a typo. All right. Thank you. Alrighty. So next, if we flip through the next couple pages, it's more of the reference pages associated with where tables are and the contents. Next, we have our introduction. So this is your first time you're seeing this chapter. So one of the first things I wanted to do as a group, because I left them intentionally blank, is to make it really clear at the beginning of this document, what are our 3 keeps and our 3 potential changes, just to kind of set the tone for that master plan. So I guess I'd like to open up to the floor. If we had to say, looking at our master plan process, knowing our community, do we know what our 3 keeps of Elmont are?
So are you, what exactly are you looking for from us?
So I guess what I would be considering, or what I would think that we would probably do is probably a small town. We want to keep our small town. Or you want to keep a close-knit community. So those, I guess, are different themes that we've heard over and over again that people very much value. And so I want to make sure that's clear in the introduction. These are things we really want to keep.
Any of the members have any comments relative to that?
I like the small town atmosphere. I think that should be on there for sure.
Anything else anybody has to say?
2 more, right?
I was thinking 3 because 3 is a good number. But if we only want to have one major theme, I would just rewrite this to be different and say one of our number 1 value is to have a small town feel. That's fine too. If that's really our sounding purpose, that's all I wanted to do at this introduction is make it very clear this is who we are.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of our slogan where home is, and what, you know.
No, I agree. In fact, the one most popular on the board Tuesday, a place, to call home. Yeah, I mean, it seems to fit, it really does. I would tend to agree with that. That's what a lot of people like. They would like to, if you read between the lines, they'd like to have all the conveniences, but they want to keep the small size. And that's hard to do. But that's, in reading all this stuff and the comments, that seems to be, they like the smallness, they like, like everything else, but they also want, the conveniences and some of the other things that, other areas have. And it's just hard to do, that's all. Yeah. That's exactly what they're looking for. It really is.
And then we don't have to have a change category. I just thought it made sense to have the keep and the change, but with this master plan though, there's a lot of different new content. I don't know that we're proposing anything catastrophically different. We're not changing
so.
a lot of districts or anything. So if we don't feel like we need to really announce the change, that's okay too. So I'm going to
Okay.
take that part out and kind of focus more on this is our number one principle.
Okay, good.
There's some intentional placeholders because we haven't determined our public hearing yet and the adoption. So that's going to be filled in later on. The historic section is from the previous plan, more or less.
I found that very interesting, the historic section. There was some things I didn't know, and even though there's a little statistical information and there's a lot of good historical information in there. And if somebody just recently moved here, that really helps give them a picture of how the village evolved over time. It really does. That's very good.
And then I didn't have a picture of the open house, but I was going to do people that are actually in our community. So that was that placeholder, waiting for that event to put in there of the people.
Historical section,
Yes.
last paragraph. Did we actually lay sewer and water mains in 1857, or is that supposed to be 1957?
I think it makes more sense to say 19 based on the order. Yeah, typo there. Good catch. All right. Moving pretty quickly through the demographic section. I think the most, summary portion, which is on 2-6, that's really kind of the main components associated with some of that of our community, really one of those big things. We're increasing our population by the 75-year-olds and older. We're decreasing in the 20 to 34-year-olds. Our median age is 39.2. We have almost 3,000 people, more or less 150 off of that. We have an average household size of 2.5. And then we are mainly a commuter community, but everyone's commuting within 30 minutes. So that's really not too bad of a component.
That's basically you're talking about statistical information.
Correct.
Anyway. Yeah. And if somebody was to ask, how current is this, what would be our answer?
So this is based off of the 2020 census, but also some of the American Community Survey 5-year statistical information. And so it's a statistically valid representation of over a period of 5 years.
Okay.
And so it's relatively consistent. They just now launched the 2022 census data for the American Community Survey. It goes behind a few years until it relaunches. So it's the most we have available at the time.
If somebody in the audience asked the question, would this be similar data if other communities were doing comparisons like we are? Would they be using about the same statistical information from the same time frame? Not ours, but I mean their own.
Yes,
If somebody asked, so if somebody wanted to compare, Romeo or Dryden or K-Pac, they'd be using some similar information.
Yep, I would find it very probable they're using the exact same source.
Okay, Good.
Because the census is the best source for a lot of that information.
Okay.
Then we have the housing study that we did. So it has a lot of that, again, census data associated with housing. One of the things that's a little bit different in some of the data that's included here is it also includes some forecasting data. We also talk about state equalization value. So that's looking at some of the, again, most recent data we could get from Lapeer County Equalization Department. But looking at the changes over the last 3 years on that value change from that taxation purpose.
Now, would that be, let me answer that question. In your projections out 5 years, you're using historical data in order to make projections out 5 years. Was there anything unusual in your historical data that may not be the same 5 years out?
Well, that's always going to be hard because you're guessing.
Okay.
You're doing a real good educated guess. One of the things with the population data specifically that we trended
Yeah.
is we couldn't do it specifically for Elmont because you're too small of a sample. And so it was more of like a county trend. So some of those are, you have the same, a similar makeup as the county does.
Okay.
We do break you out separately from them in different sections. But when you looked at the forecasting, you need more data to be more accurate on a trend.
Gotcha.
And so that's one of the things that with some of that forecasting, you have to do a grain of salt because it's looking at a larger area, but also forecasting. A lot can happen that changes things.
Oh, absolutely.
But
I
I
mean-
do think from a national trending standpoint, those are really common. They're not surprising. So it's not uncommon that those that are part of that Generation Z demographic, they're more interested in doing more urban-based living styles as opposed to being more rural.
Yep.
So that's not an uncommon trend that we're seeing at the national state level. And then some of the statistical data you'll see, it shows that the elderly population, it hasn't still quite peaked yet. I think ours, I don't think if you were to build a bunch of assisted living facilities, you would be over capacity. So that was a fear probably a few years ago is, well, why are we building all of these facilities? Because that's a population-based need, and then it's going to die down again. I don't think that's quite our situation from a needs analysis standpoint,
Okay,
but that's definitely something that we see.
very good.
One of the other things we did as part of the Elmont housing study was talk about neighborhoods. So some of our distinct neighborhoods as part of a little bit of our analysis. We talked about built-out forecasting, so looking at based on property that's currently vacant, and then we have considered for residential, what does that look like? And if we were to have just single family versus some type of a more density model, so having attached that are 2 or even apartments in some situations. We evaluated the accessory dwelling units depending on, based on looking at sizes and relationships. That was more of an analysis component. Then if you're on page 3-9, we provided that map that kind of shows where that infill residential housing development could be potentially, as opposed to lot sizes for that those residential uses.
Should that be ADU?
There's always a typo. Thank you. So we might use that when we're making zoning choices, looking at how that density changes. And then we have that summary section talking about the housing characteristics. Any other questions, comments? Next is talking about natural features. So we focused on soil type, which is required by the state to at least mention it. It's not as applicable for village or cities. It is for rural communities because you talk about farm soils. We talked about wetlands. There are a few different components of wetlands specifically in the village, mostly focused on the North Branch Clinton River. Part of that's our community park. So that's convenient from our land use standpoint, is it's not likely to be overbuilt. So that is a good thing from our standpoint. We talked a little bit about our watershed. So we're part of the Clinton River Watershed Council. briefly mention talking about some of the different county drains that go through our community, as they are a water asset associated with our community. We talk about tree cover. So this is something from a case law standpoint is really encouraged, especially if you have some type of tree preservation requirements in your zoning ordinance, to talk about trees being a good thing and that you want them in your community. And so that's why that was specifically added, is to clarify that trees are important to our community. Just like we look at demographic information or we look at wetlands, trees are important too. It's just an asset on its own.
I have a hypothetical for you.
Okay.
Every piece of vacant land we had in the village, if we built on it, residential, is our current infrastructure, can it handle whatever we build?
I don't know that I'm the right person to answer that question.
Okay. Because we're looking at places to develop. I guess my question would be water and sewer, if we're in the village, and let's say just by chance, everything fell perfectly and we built on every piece of vacant land that we had, can our infrastructure currently as it stands handle the new growth?
I believe our water can, our sewer, there would have to be a study done, I would think.
I follow that.
Yeah, because when we had two different discussions about that 80 acres out on Kidder that is township land.
Yep.
And both times, we did a cost study, but we did a cost study to see if it was feasible for us to do it, and it was gonna cost our residents more to allow it than not to allow it. So we voted it down. So it never came to a study of the wastewater being able to handle it, but there has been questions if it can or not.
See,
So, and I don't know how many acres is behind West Winds? Do we know? That's where that acre.
I mean, I can guess.
and it's a hypothetical, but let's, in our planning, we're looking about trying to, add housing where we can and make things available for people. Well, you start adding those, then the question is, how is the current infrastructure and can it
Future
handle
land
it?
use section.
Because we could be really lucky and say, okay, we've got a development here, we're gonna add X number of homes.
Right.
And then somebody sends up a red flag, said, wait a minute, our wastewater treatment plant can't handle the extra load.
And I know back in the late 90s, early 2000s, when Drakeshire was going to come online, that those contractors helped the cost of upgrading the June Drive lift station
Yep.
to be able to handle that capacity.
Okay.
So it's 91 acres, the Cherry
91?
Street.
I guess we should keep that in the back of our mind, should somebody come and say, okay, or, somebody walks into the village office, says, I want to develop this 50 acres and I'm going to put X number of, and all of a sudden we say, whoa, we got a problem.
It says that in the industrial park and that small parcel that Novak sold in behind Drakeshire, that there's a question of how much you're going to actually build on it.
Right.
Those are the only really big parcels left in the village, within the village. I mean, there's some lots here and there, but
And one of the
Go
things
ahead.
that helps us in that kind of futuristic approach too is that in our zoning ordinance, when you do a rezoning or we do site plans or a special land use, we have control of our standards that talk about does the public have the sufficient capacity for this use? It talks about public services, so that's your police, that's your schools. But also talks about your water and sewer capacity. There's case law that proves communities can deny a project because if somebody comes in here and says, hi, I'd like to have like a $2,000 or 2,000 worker facility on this parcel and I can fit, we may not have capacity for that. And so we can deny that.
But
If that were to
but
ever-
The reason I'm saying we should keep it in our mind is we're also encouraging development in the village. So on one hand, we're saying, yes, we'd like to see development, both for tax base and for residences and a place to live and everything else. On the other hand, wait a minute, you do this development, we got a problem because of infrastructure won't handle it. So that's all I'm saying
Sure.
is that it might be hypothetical, but one of these days, somebody could come walking in and say, I'm ready to go. And then we have to set up a red flag and say, we can't accommodate it.
Because I know since that study was done, I know one of the things that Brian had said they had done that helped their system, or at least we haven't measured it, I don't think yet, was that we did the different alignment of our sanitary, which took out a bunch of leaks. So stormwater was leaking into it and then just
Yeah.
overfilling it because it wasn't supposed to be going in.
Yeah.
And so we're not quite sure, I don't think, how that impacted it, but it was, as far as I understand, it wasn't great, the level of intrusion that was happening, and that alignment really worked well. So that's absolutely, we want to make sure that we're watching that.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're talking again about that future land use, and if we're making any other tweaks, keeping that in mind.
All I'm saying is, if we're going to do one, we better be ready to answer the other one. That's
Oh,
all.
sure.
Okay.
Three times so far?
Pardon?
Behind West Winds, that's,
Yeah,
is that brought to us twice so far?
that I don't know.
Hasn't it been brought to us twice about development?
Not since I've been here.
Yeah, wow. One was about 15.
Maybe 15, 20 years ago, there was one inquiry of 15, 20 years ago.
Right, that's why.
But then they looked at the Cherry Street Bridge, and then they looked at the other, there's, on Jonathan, there's an ingress. Is it? No, it's not
It's up
Jonathan.
top. It's
On West Winds, there's an
yeah, on
ingress
West Winds.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
there's-
allows you back into that field.
Yeah.
And there was talk about that, but the residents weren't very happy either. Because when we redid the Cherry Street Bridge, there was talk of making it 2-lane instead of what it is, to accommodate the future. But at the time, the cost compared to the return and possibility of it, we just went with
Sure.
the
I
base plan.
understand. Okay, sorry, keep going.
Oh, we're good.
Okay, good,
This is all healthy conversation. That's
Good.
the goal.
good.
So our next chapter is chapter 5, talking about existing land use. So just doing an inventory of our vacant or fallow land versus uses. One of the things to keep in mind is parcels were divided to show some of this. So you can see some of these are not having frontage, and that's because there may be a home that's near the front. And so we took a portion that was more or less a legal lot size and took out the back, just to show how much, I guess, is from a max out scenario, this is what that more or less looks like. So we are not by any means land use maxed, which is a good thing for what we want. So it kind of goes through and describes different things as far as the what those different classifications are, and we compared it to our 2012 existing land use plan, or existing land use inventory, which was done back in the day. Back that far. So not a whole lot's changed. Devonshire is probably the most significant one that's changed over time, specifically being built. It's really hard to see because of how old the map is, but there are little dots of actual single-family homes.
Take a picture with Hubble, take a new picture with Victor Seniors, or Senior Victor's.
Which one?
On page 5-3, this one, it's now Senior Victor's.
Oh, complete the
huddle is
lot.
no longer
All right.
there.
Update. Full update. Okay.
So is that map 5.2 really from 2012?
Yes.
Okay,
And it's 2 consultants ago.
okay.
And then we look at, again, kind of our general summary. So 44% of our current use of our land is single-family residential. About a quarter of it's considered that vacant or underutilized. And some of those are back portions of single-family lots, and so they may stay that way. That's great. And that's just something to keep in mind, is that small town feel and stuff like that. We anticipate there may be more need for multiple family alternative housing for single family, potentially some more commercial, more industrial. I don't think you're going to need more significant commercial, but it just depends kind of how different things lay out and what other neighbors do too. So next is chapter 6, which talks about our community facilities. So we Talk about our quality of life, looking at seniors and things of that nature. I have a double period. So I'll fix that. We talk about our schools. We talk about our parks and recreation plan that was updated. So just make sure that it's a round circle approach with some of those improvements. We talk about our downtown development authority, some of their plans. Talk about the library, the municipal offices, our police, our joint fire and emergency services as part of this chapter as well.
Those items under Downtown Development Authority, those were designed by the DDA, basically?
Yes.
These ideas were developed by the DDA board? Okay, all right.
Next chapter is chapter 7, talking about our thoroughfare plan. So we talk about our different road classifications and different counts for traffic. So if you go on page 7-2, that's where we have the different shown art, different road hierarchy classifications. Next, we have our PACER ranking. So this is a pretty standardized across the board way of measuring quality of roadways. So this is based on the most recent PACER that we got a hold of, which was done by Lapeer County, or the Lapeer County Road Commission. So this is pretty up-to-date information as far as the quality and how to go about that phrase.
May I ask a question just on that? Who evaluates the condition of roads? Do you, or is this come from a different report?
So we got it from a different report from the Lapeer County Road Commission.
Okay, Road Commission.
And so
Okay.
then PACER is a industry standard for road evaluation. So there's 10 to 8. So if you're on page 7-3, there's 10 through 8 is ranked as good, 7 through 5 is fair, and then poor is 4 through 1. And so it talks about different, when you go to do that report, it talks about, I kind of minimize it into a sentence because it gets too technical otherwise. But talk about that you're looking at more significant things. They have pictures so that you're more likely to get an apple-to-apple comparison, the evaluator, as opposed to something that's, oh, I consider that a 2 or whatever the case may be.
Now, how often do they evaluate roads? Do we know that?
Depends on the organization. So I want to say our regional authority, because we're in region 4, 5,
5.
something like that. They, I think, do it every 4 years.
4 years?
Something like that. I know this was something that we had done separate from whatever the region was doing because they weren't planning on updating it. And the last one was done when we updated the last plan.
Okay.
So I don't know. Sometimes they do it on an annual basis, but it depends on your organization sometimes that you pull that data from. I'm not entirely sure.
So when they do the roads, do they go and look at just the main roads from the county, or do they go to every road in the village?
They went to every road in the village.
Every road in the village, okay.
Yes. So next, after we talk about our major roads, we have to talk about alternative transportation. And so we do have that senior shuttle that kind of helps provide some services for those who otherwise don't have a vehicle or comfort of being able to use their own. And then we talk about our sidewalk inventory. So we identify some of the major issues that we noticed. Sidewalks to nowhere, disconnected intersection, no sidewalk buffers. So that just means where it's right on the road. There is some level of convenience because you can
Sure.
hypothetically plow the sidewalk when you're doing the road.
Yep.
But more or less it becomes a hazard because if you have a 2-year-old or can imagine a 2-year-old stay on the sidewalk as opposed to venturing into the street, as opposed to sidewalk where there's a green buffer, you're more removed from that traffic and just a little bit more time for an incident to happen.
Oh, sure.
Even if you're walking your dog or something of that nature.
Now, Kim, is the St. Clair project still on track? When will it start?
That I do not know.
Okay. And it doesn't include sidewalks though, right? Is it just the road and the infrastructure below it?
Yes,
There's no sidewalks?
correct.
Okay.
And then The last two notified issues were maintenance or obstructions, specifically of existing sidewalks, and then downtown crossings. So you really only have the one closer to St. Clair, so you got to double back if you wanted to go from one to the other. And so what then was provided on 5-7 is an inventory. So we tried to identify some of the potential future locations for sidewalks. So the main purpose being completing loops is the goal. If there was a safe sidewalk on one side, that doesn't mean everywhere in the village you need two on both sides. I don't think that's quite where we're at yet. But I think the first part to start is connectivity associated with that and trying to make sure you have complete loops or junctions.
What is a protected crossing?
So a protected crossing, an example
'Cause I
is,
see there's one on-
go to the, we're almost there.
Oh, okay.
I have a
sorry.
picture.
I jumped.
Yep, no problem. Because of that exact scenario, it's always better to have a picture. And then the next one blows up into our downtown area, showing some assets as far as like public parking, our library, where some of those different crossing improvements could be in the protected crossing. So under those recommendations on 7-7, you can see this is from Oxford. So it is an MDOT corridor. They were able to get this type of improvement where there's a refuge island. And there's very clear signage on both sides that indicate this is a crossing. It's not just something painted on the pavement and you hope somebody saw it or sees you walking. Other communities do have some type of lighting associated with that. I know, at least in knowing Oxford's downtown relatively well, having this more passive approach, I think, may be more applicable in our situation as well, due to the amount of pedestrian traffic you typically have and how much traffic you have going down the road. And so having that protected island where you can at least make it halfway through, that seems more or less doable from, I think, our standpoint.
In other communities, I've passed some of those where they have the designated walk areas. And it is, it's a violation if you cross that when somebody wants to walk, right?
So
Isn't
you
it,
don't,
isn't it mandatory that you're supposed to stop?
I don't believe, so it does talk about on those signs you have to yield for a pedestrian.
Okay.
I don't know, this is more of a public safety question of a police chief. At what point is the intent to cross a
Okay.
problem? So I know back in the day, the city of Ann Arbor did, if you look like you're going to cross the street, that was a violation.
Really?
I don't think that's the general rule of thumb in Michigan. I think once I've entered the roadway, you're supposed to yield. And then people by
So-
courtesy
so if
sometimes
I'm-
will stop
If I'm
for you.
approaching one of these walkways, the assumption is I have the right of way, correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
I would defer to a police chief, but that was always my understanding. Once you enter it, then you are the priority.
Gotcha. Okay.
So next is talking about our utility evaluation. So looking at our water infrastructure, so the map associated with it is on 8-2, showing the general location of where water is, which is on most of our major street and thoroughfares. The next page talks about our location of our sanitary sewer. So again, mostly in all of our different residential neighborhoods and things of that nature. And then going out to the school, that's where the only area that it goes out of our jurisdiction is to service the school. So we provide some recommendations for DPW associated with that specific maintaining of that program regarding the capital improvement plan.
I have a question.
Sure.
To the hospital,
Sewer.
Sewer.
yes.
No water, just sewer.
So we have some different recommendations that are there. Looking into the future, something that we do kind of mention, and when you're talking about growth, and especially from a village standpoint, is annexation or 425 agreements. And so we just help clarify what that means. We have not designated desired property. We have not made any level of aggression other than just clarifying what those terms mean. Because there are two different ways of property transfer from one jurisdiction to a different jurisdiction.
Okay.
Next is talking about public engagement, and I will encourage you now to flip to, we'll keep this one. I changed the picture, so that's another picture of our open house. But our community survey, so we took that back in September, and we asked a variety of different responses. We had 360 responses to our survey, so that's a pretty good turnout from a virtual standpoint. I won't go through every single section here associated with the community survey, but I don't think we were ever super surprised by any of the data that was provided. We did query out township responses from village responses when it was significantly different. And so it did change some of the priorities, which is noted in this report summarizing the data, but we did prioritize the village component of that. So then if you go to 9-3, now I will have you flip to your new material for tonight that was on your desk, which is the summary of our open house. If you are interested, I did keep the boards here from that night, just in case you wanted to kind of look through them. Essentially, here's going to be the highlights. A place to call home is our winning slogan. So I think more or less officials are happy with that as our winning slogan. We had almost 30 people in attendance. We did have a young family that had several children. So some of them participated in some of the surveys, not all of the surveys. So you'll see that later on. We probably have a suspect of which one were they, but we'll get there. So one of the first things we talked about was today, and that was a data-driven slide, talking about a lot of our population trends and things of that nature. And we had these different statements. And so we asked, how much do you agree with this? About a third of the vote always was neutral. And then there weren't very many people, maybe one person or two people that would say strongly agree or strongly disagree. Most people were in the middle. So I just grouped them as agreed and disagreed to just make it a little bit simpler. So 70% agreed that the village should work on improving housing affordability. 61% agreed that they should increase housing options for those who are 75 years or older. 61% agreed on having increased housing options for those that are 20 to 34. 31% agreed that they should only encourage only a minimum amount of residential unit growth within the village. 22% agreed, if the village does not increase the number of residents over time, I'm willing to pay an increased share to cover the cost of community services and account for fewer residents. 21% said they would agreed that the village should increase the number of rental units.
So we don't want rental units, we don't want to pay more money, but we want all the services we can get, right?
Yes.
That works well. That really,
Well,
it sort of fits.
So I think the big three wins, and I do think that only having 31% agree with minimal growth shows that you have probably 60%, a majority, that are okay with some level of growth.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have, I think the biggest part is how do you focus it on those age demographics and try to keep it within the character of our community. I think that's when people start going, oh, wait a minute.
At least we older people got our 2 cents in anyway.
So the next section was talking about transportation. And so the first question we asked is, are you aware of our 10-year strategic plan? And so about a third of the individuals were not aware, as opposed to being aware.
No, it's in the other document. You don't have it.
Yes, it is. It's on the back.
Oh, there you go. It's on the right page. This one here. Catch up with this. All right, we're ready. Let's go.
Okay.
That's why we're trying to keep
Always
the old
somebody
people.
holding up. Somebody holding up the group. All right, let's go.
So the next one was talking about, we focused on the next 5 road projects. And so we asked individuals to rank how much they agreed with it. So our St. Clair project, 89% agreed. So no disagreement there. So that's good to hear. In 2024, we're also hoping to do the Jonathan East Ridge Drive. So 52% agreed, majority agreed, a good chunk though were neutral. Next is talking about the Kaylin sub in 2025, a variety of different streets there. So a little over, almost 60% agreed, 42% neutral. Then you have Johnson Street in 2026 with Maple and Sullivan and Stone, 63% agreed, 5% disagreed, 32 neutral. And then the last one was in 2027, Research and Development Drive. So 62% agreed, about a third did neutral, and then a quarter almost disagreed. And so we left a comment section that people could choose to fill out if they wanted to kind of explain why they disagreed or neutral or agreement with it. There weren't very many comments in there other than they felt the 2026 and 2027 project should be done sooner, was some people's responses. And just to make sure that these are data-based decisions was encouraged.
Some thought the 27 project should be done sooner.
Correct.
Really?
I have a question about the Kaylin sub. Is this 2025? Is that the date that it's starting or the date that it's completed?
It should start.
Okay, because they just did Dawn Drive in our sub there. So I was,
Did they do all of Dawn though? I thought they only did a portion of Dawn.
I think they did all of it. But it was
Oh.
kind of weird because they came in, they did the one street, and then nothing else was done.
Oh,
So I was just like,
They
kind of
are
random.
planning on finishing it in the spring.
In the fall, they did just cul-de-sacs.
Okay, gotcha.
There was a plan to do the rest, of it, but because of, resource time and the contractor couldn't get to it, and then it got colder faster than we expected.
Yeah, makes sense. I was just curious.
Is that one in 25, would that be tear out and redo or just resurface?
But like they did Dawn Drive, it's just resurface. I think they just laid over top of the old stuff.
Yeah, would they tear it up, tear the top
I
off and then put a whole new base down?
I believe so.
I believe that's what we passed.
Okay.
The next part of the transportation we talked about was sidewalks. And so we talked about the top 3 priorities associated with it. So, and we had our participants rank from a sidewalk perspective, which of these should really rise above. And the highest vote was increasing the network of connectivity. Next was adding crosswalks, and next was adding corner connections. When we talked about funding, I don't know that anyone's too horribly surprised, but the number one push was for general funding. So use the funding that you already have to kind of focus in on doing some type of sidewalk component for it. And we asked people to rank their level of support, either high, medium, low, or not going to happen. So for those who are a little bit more disgruntled, I try to give them a group so they could be there. Next is talking about special assessments. So we tried to explain the difference between those two and millage rates. I know I did spend some time talking to different participants to further explain it a little bit easier, what the difference is between those two. Special assessments being very fixed location, you have to have that improvement within that property, as opposed to millages over the entire community. Everyone's paying for that. So I don't think too many people would be surprised by the millage rate being the least supported. Next, we talked about our protect and serve. So we asked participants in our community survey to say, what are the things that really keep you here? And so the top 4 were these: the small town atmosphere, the friendly people and social connections, safe neighborhood and community, and historic character. And so what we asked is further, how do we implement these? And what do you think is going to be the most effective? And so I listed it bullet-wise, the most effective to least effective, to kind of put that in. So I'll let you read those. When we get to safe neighborhood and community, nobody supported wayfinding. So that may be something we choose to take off of our implementation action plan if nobody supported the wayfinding approach. 2 other historical preservations that received no support was establishing of a historical district, which I will apologize, I was not aware we actually do have one, so I apologize for that. And then not encouraging homeowners to enroll their properties in the historic registry. So that kind of leaves historic with the general thought of preserve historic features that contribute to the village as best you can. And that's not very easy to put into action in the same way. So that's a little bit hard because we can try to hit.
What would be an example of historic features?
So this was one of those goals we had from the previous plan. And so how I would explain it is, so in our downtown, we have the historic looking clock. We have a lot of brick focus because that's more historic in nature. So those are different features that we're trying to keep that are historic and keep those within. So the only way to regulate that, which we already have in our zoning, is to require masonry. Right, and we have some color coordination and things of that nature. So we have some different controls at our review level. Other than that, some of it's discretion by the DDA if they purchase sidewalk furniture, things of that nature. Those look historic or iron or things of that nature.
Now, the renovation being done at the old Huddles, now obviously that they've changed the whole face of the front of that building. Did they have to get any approval of that ahead of time?
I do not know.
I don't either. That's why I was wondering. I never came here.
Where are you talking about?
The Huddles.
Oh, the Huddle, okay.
The whole front's changed. The
They
awning
just
is off.
repainted it.
Is that all? They didn't?
Yeah,
They
they
didn't change
just
anything
painted the
else?
brick, yeah, they hadn't changed anything.
Okay, well, it looks entirely different.
Yeah, oh yeah, that really spruced it up.
I apologize. I'm sorry.
That's
I-
okay.
I thought for sure they had changed, but I mean, if somebody down there wanted to change the face of their building, does that have to come before us for approval?
It does. I think it's our trigger is when the material changes. So
That's all DDA anyway, would we be affected?
That's
by
why I'm
that?
asking the question.
Oh, okay.
Do we even see it, or does it go before the DDA and they say aye, yes, or no?
No, typically not the DDA, unless they're part of a funding party. They wouldn't have discretion over approving colors. Some communities will put in their zoning ordinance, any change on facade, even coloring, requires approval. So if the city of Lapeer does that. So even if I paint it, you have to get it approved.
The reason I'm getting at that is because you
Yeah.
talk about historical
Really?
features. A lot of times, the style of the buildings really adds to the historical feature. But if you have somebody come in and all of a sudden they want to renovate the whole front of the building, which takes it away from the historical feature, are they allowed to do that, or do they have to get approval to do that?
I don't think there's any.
Because Good Grounds had to get their color approved.
By this body? Because I
By
know
the
they.
DDA.
Oh, really? Because I
But
remember.
it didn't come through us.
Yeah. Mm-mm. I know, because I remember talking about when they were going in with Mr. Trent, we had talked about if it had to come here because it was a similar enough use or not, that zoning
Oh.
permit problem. But I don't think we talked about colors. I don't know. We'll think on that one.
Would you please? I mean, I'm sort of curious because I like the idea of the historical features of the buildings. But then if you have somebody come in that really wants to modernize or change the whole outside perspective of their building and take away from the historical features of that building, are they allowed to do that?
Sure. So continuing on that line of thought, would we prefer it to be a DDA approval, or would we prefer it to come to this approval, or do we think it should be handled administratively?
I don't know that.
Okay.
I honestly don't know the answer. I mean, maybe the members here would have an opinion, say, hey, we'd like to see what they're going to do to the front of the building. I don't know.
You have jurisdiction over it.
So
And that's
planning
true.
does. You can in planning, as far as the zoning or as far as a zoning ordinance. You
Yeah.
can say the trigger is a changing of color, changing of material. Someone needs to authorize it.
I would think, I mean, otherwise the person, whoever wants to do that, is going to have a free hand. If nobody says, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing? They can change whatever they like.
This might be a good small discussion topic at the training meeting,
Yes.
because we're gonna have all entities
Parties.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just bring it up as a
To discuss
point.
that point and the historical point of the same.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Okay, That's a good
Because
idea.
I like the historical, I like historical buildings. My home's, was built in 1840. So you don't want to change the face of the village and modernize it without having some input as to what people are doing. That's what I'm getting at.
Sure. I'm not aware of very many DDAs having control over it. I know during facades, that's when in the city of Lapeer, the DDA would have an opinion, is because some of their funding is going towards that improvement. But that might just be my lack of knowledge. So I'll circle back with Angela too,
Okay.
to make sure that she's aware of that question for March.
Yeah, this is the DDA website. This is for the facade though.
That's for the grant.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
that makes sense.
and there's approved color palettes.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's what I was thinking. I apologize.
No, you're good.
That's only for the grant, isn't it?
Yeah, that's for the facade grant.
So that's for a specific purpose.
Right.
Yes.
All right. Anyway, I just thought I'd bring it up.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
So then we had an open response board that people could put sticky notes on saying, this is what you want to add to your community. So the winner was complete sidewalks and a trail. Nature trail was talked about a lot. Add downtown life, downtown parking, less blight, public library with more books, park improvements, playground, and faster slides. So those were kind of those recreational kind of groupings on that side there on the right. So next is talking about change. So with the Redevelopment Ready Community Program, we had talked at length at our previous meeting. Well, out of these four, what do you guys think are really the top ones that we should focus on? And so that was the 605 South Main, which is directly south of the river where the bridge is on Van Dyke, on the right-hand side where that little warehouse building is. That was then followed by the, gonna slaughter the name of that individual, but it's the vacant property across from Dollar General that we have as part of that multiple family, and then Burley Park, which is our Veterans Memorial.
Should that say in order of most importance?
That would read better. Yep. So that was that. The next one, we talked about 3 different scenarios. And so the 3 different scenarios was of the property that was on the south east side of Van Dyke, at the edge of our village boundary. It's a agricultural property. It includes 3 specific parcels to be that whole conglomerate that is shown. So you have your aging in place, which was the most intense option. It offered low intensity commercial or office, multiple family, attached housing, park space or open space, assisted living facility, and single family accommodations. So this one was the second highest supported within the project, as opposed to Drakeshire was the one that received the most support overall, Drakeshire 2.0, which is the current scenario. If we kept nothing different in our future land use map, they can do Drakeshire 2.0. Based on our lot sizes that are the minimum lot sizes, we currently have it as that residential. So 3 could happen either way. 2 was the least supported, in which we had some multiple family, some assisted living, and single family, so exclusively residential. So that's kind of the hierarchy. So my commentary on this would be is if we really want to push and keep 3 as the only option, then we have nothing we need to change. If we wanted to have a door open to potentially have scenario 1 be a possibility, we would want to make a change to our master plan to show that we would allow that. One of the ways would be to make that property or a combination of properties a planned unit development. I don't think we necessarily want to split parcels or show that exact formation. I think we would want to have some of that market input associated with it. But if you do it as a planned unit development, it allows for the mixture of uses. And so that's how you would kind of, if we want to open that open, we could do that. The village has always taken the historical precedence. We wait for a property owner to initiate a rezoning to actually make a change. As opposed to waiting for it. So right now, it would stay in that R1 until somebody came along and said, I'd like it not to be. And then we have our Burley Park improvements. So we kind of compared 3 different ones together, talking about looking at additional parking, sidewalks or seating improvements, and then decorative features such as landscaping and walls. So the highest score was for parking. Everyone only got 1 vote if you had to pick an improvement. So most said parking. 7 talked about sidewalks and seating, and then lastly was your landscaping or another kind of decorative feature in a way.
Okay.
So that is the public engagement chapter. Zip on through. All right, next is talking about our visions and strategies. And so we simplified our document to really talk about our visions, like what do we want the village to be, and then have specific strategies or actions on how we're going to get there. So I wasn't going to go in depth on this because we went very in depth a couple months ago when we did do this specific analysis. I don't anticipate majorly any tweaks other than some of the historical preservation ones that we went over that people had 0 interest in. I don't know if we want to remove those. By having them still there doesn't mean that you're encouraging it one way or the other. It's just words on paper. So it's up to you as a group if you want to, based on that input, actually strike it from other content, or if you want to keep it there but just make it a low priority when we get to that point.
Yeah, I agree. Keep it there. No sense striking it.
Do you want to change the priority and make it a lower priority though, or just leave it the way it is?
Leave it the way it is.
Leave it the way it is? Yeah, we'll leave it the way it is.
Okay, that sounds good.
Thank you.
Then our next article is talking about Chapter 11, which is our land use plan. That's on page 11-1. So we went over this relatively in depth last time as well, talking about our different future land use classifications. These are intended to correlate with our zoning ordinance, so to give us some direction on which way we want to go from a land use management standpoint. So I don't anticipate any changes here other than, as I just mentioned, do we want to have a planned unit development for that southern property? We just talked about those different scenarios. Because if we wanted to open the door, this would be the place to add that description of the property. If we don't have to. We can always make an amendment down the road. The next time we're going to officially open the master plan would be 5 years.
But it could be changed as somebody approaches us. They just have to change those zoning.
So here's the 2 scenarios that you would play out. One, that they would apply for rezoning. It would be somewhat difficult, relatively very difficult, to get that approval to a PUD of our future land use map and where it's located. So it is on a major thoroughfare, so that's in its favor. It is near some commercial. But other than that, and it being, I guess, a larger size, it's really not designated to be anything other than single family. I think if you want to open up the option for scenario 1, then you would have it be planned unit development. If you want to make sure that it's more likely to be a Devonshire 2.0, then we would do nothing. Because the other thing is if we go back and amend the master plan, that's a minimum 4-month process. Because you have to go through the initiation process, 63-day notice period, or it's 48 because you're just doing a minor amendment. But still, that's 2 months in the developer waiting and then going through all the other process portions.
So if we're going to do it, we're doing it now or we're not doing it.
Well, and the thing is we talk about it in our open house section. So in 5 years, it's not like the idea is gone.
Right.
So I do think because we have it there, that might help us a little bit in that rezoning decision, because we could say there's been a change in condition. There's more of a demand. So we maybe thought that might be a possibility. That's why we did the scenario situation. I just want to be careful how much I put you guys on a limb, because we have the option to do that now and we chose not to, and for a good reason.
What's the general feeling of the group? Do we want to do anything like that now or leave it the way it is? Do it now?
I agree.
What do you think?
Yeah, the depends on what the village wants. Does the village want to have the ability to it be more than residential? I mean, does that open it up for a big box?
For big box to come in?
So with that planned unit development, you're allowed to have the mixture of different ideas. So I think the idea that somebody couldn't come in and ask for a retail that would take up 10,000 square feet, I mean, they'd have the right to ask. I don't know that we'd necessarily have to grant it, but they have the right to ask in a PUD situation, yes.
I'm all for flexibility, but the greater majority of this plan says keep it small town feel.
Yeah.
So do we want to open it up to retail down in that area coming into town?
That's a good point. Good point.
Do we have the ability to deny it if it's too big of an ask? Or, well, I guess what's our ability to shoot things down if we don't?
Sure. So a planned unit development would require going through that rezoning process, if I remember correctly. And so you would have to get that rezoned to show the different proportions. So in a planned unit development, you have to at least show in your rezoning application where you're going to put things. And you can deny it based on where the appropriateness of where they put things. So if they put a bunch of industrial along the Orchard Hills subdivision, we'd say, no, that doesn't make any sense from our village standpoint and compatibility or harmonious of our region area. As you get closer to Van Dyke, and if we do put in that commercial, especially since we have in one of our scenarios or stuff, there's a little bit more gravity. I just want to be careful how we craft it because I don't want to give too much discretion on something we really don't want. So if at this point in time, we're kind of thinking Devonshire 2.0 was the winning supported use, we don't have to do something. I think if a project does come down the road, we do have it as that scenario in our public engagement. And if you wanted to make a loose argument, we can always push on that there's a change in condition that has made this more appropriate than when we did the master plan. But I want to really tread lightly on that because that's a slippery slope.
I'm all for flexibility, but part of that parcel backs up to the park and to McIntosh.
Yeah, it does.
So I would, if it's going to be built out, I'd rather it be homes. I think I think that would be the best for the community than having a commercial space next to the hill and the park.
And a rezoning does require a public hearing,
That's
correct?
right. Yep.
So they could come out and
Right.
voice their opinion.
That's the way I would go, but.
You agree?
All right, so we're not going to make a change.
Nope.
Sounds good.
Gonna leave it the way it is.
Okay, and
Keep our
then,
fingers crossed.
right.
Good argument, Tim.
Good idea.
I'm just going off of the data and what we've been hearing and we all see what 26 mile is and we all see what 34 mile is going to become. So,
Yeah.
So the last chapter of new content for us tonight is the implementation plan. Oh, wait, whoops. You have to go, before I forget, you need to go to your other new content for tonight that was on your desk. So this is the redevelopment stuff, due to the redevelopment RRC community. And so, as part of that RRC, I don't know if everyone found that, it has 3 properties,
All right.
some orange boxes.
Yep.
Okay, that's right. So of our winning survey results, these were our 3 top priority sites from that standpoint. And so I provided a little bit of description and showed a picture of those specific properties. And then what I did is I know we had a lengthy conversation on potential other redevelopments, but we really, sometimes there was work on it and then the others weren't. So what I did is I just put it in this catch-all. There's other potential redevelopment or development opportunities, and just kind of listed all of the ones that were there. these aren't our 3 top priorities, but just so we don't lose, I guess, that institutional discussion that we had. That was kind of my
I
goal.
would check your boxes for spacing and numbers.
Unique property.
I don't know how that happened.
And is it Teeds Street or Teeds Road?
It's a street.
Which one? Okay, gotcha.
And property identification
Yep.
in both boxes.
I don't know how that spacing got there, but I will fix it. Okay, and that is it for that. Now we're ready for the last chapter, which is on your page 12-1. And so what I did for this chapter is I took a lot of the original content from your original master plan and essentially found anything that we added new when we talked about strategies and added it in here. I tried to make sure I did the same thing if there was zoning district or zoning changes that we were considering. One of the big changes that we are doing this round is we're eliminating our O1 professional office district. If you remember during that discussion, there is one property zoned that, and we had 2 properties in our future land use map. So if it's that underutilized, let's simplify was my advice. And we're going to move forward in that direction. So that district is not fully eliminated until you actually make the change in your zoning ordinance. And so that can be next year, that can be 3 years from now, that can be 5 years from now. It's whenever we get around to it or see a need to do it. Based on the intensity of it, I don't think that's a reason to drop everything and run and update our ordinance from that standpoint. So I won't go over this list. I know a lot of you read it in your packet before this meeting, talking about different zoning districts. And we have talked about these specific points before, but I tried to organize it in a manner so it related to chapters in our zoning ordinance. So it'd be a little bit easier when we go to do that, we're evaluating those. So there's landscaping related ones, nonconformities, and then general provisions. I want to say, yep, so we do have evaluation of the building facades in the downtown as one of those general provisions that we want to keep considering. So we do.
Okay.
So we do have that. The capital improvement plan, so we list some of these different specific projects in here that we think make a lot of sense to make sure that we just kind of round robin and kind of figuring out that. One of the things that this kind of loosely talks about is because sidewalks is a major point or point of concern for our community, as I said, infill gaps of sidewalk infrastructure by implementing a capital improvement plan. I don't want to have the master plan be rigid and say this one here and then this one here and then this one here. I would prefer it to be more fluid and direction focused. And then we can, when we get to the point where we can identify sidewalks or sections, that's more appropriate in the capital improvement plan. And that's when you're doing budgeting and things of that nature. So that's why it's more loosely written in the master plan, is to be more longstanding. Next, so we have some fill in the blanks. I wanted to make sure we had a conversation. So we do our strategic plan. So in the next 5 years, what are 5 things that we want to do? So the already filled in one is you have your Parks and Rec plan. So that has a 5-year timer. So the next time it's due is 2027. Assuming that we finish the master plan in the next couple months, which we shall, it'll be due again in 29. So that leaves us, these are the 3 that were left over from the previous master plan. These were the top 3 priorities. So one was talking about rehabilitation or removal of blight of residential structures. The second was to conduct a study to look at the cost-effective extensions for water and sewer, and then amending the zoning ordinance. I don't know if those are our top 2 priorities still, and so I wanted to have that conversation with our group. Blight didn't really come up in this cycle when we ever talked about concerns or things of that nature. Same thing with the different studies. Since that was done, we have done some studies associated with that potential situation. So I don't know that we need to do it again in a 5-year cycle. and said you could do different things like,
Well, the second strategy, I'm assuming that's been done at least in one particular case, right?
correct.
A rather big case. I mean, they had quite a few acres of property. So has it been done in any other instances, Kim, or has that been the only one that the study was done?
That's been the only one.
So if somebody had a much smaller project, we'd have to look at that individually to see whether or not it would fit in with our existing infrastructure, right? So we might not want to take that out of there yet, or take it out or remove it, leave it the way it is, because we still might have individual requests on a smaller basis that would require studying that to see whether or not, it's feasible to do that.
And so this point of it being in the strategic plan is to make sure we do it by a deadline. This is still in our, that brown table that's below it. It's still in there as a strategy. So we're not losing sight that we may want to do this.
Okay.
It's just, we're not putting a date to it because I guess the goal is to have something we can actually look at and then do it. Because then we're achieving stuff.
Well, and like you say, we could go the next 5 years to 2029 and have absolutely no request for that whatsoever. That's possible to do that. And so we'd review it again 5 years from now and see whether or not it's, what we want to do with it.
Sure. So we could put in a more general date to say 2029 if we want to keep it in this table, or if we want to remove it from this table. It's still in the plan.
My opinion, I don't think we can remove it. It's a necessity because of the situation of our infrastructure. I think that has to be done anytime anybody wants to add on to our existing systems, I would think. So I don't think it can't be removed. It has to stay because that's something that we would have to do. That's just my opinion, but.
I'm assuming you're suggesting removing it because it's still carried down below. It's just not one of the priorities.
That's correct.
That's what you're
Right.
saying.
Right.
That's what she's saying, yeah.
Right.
Now, is that the Parks and Rec plan, the strategy there? Are those items that would be handled primarily by the Parks and Rec board?
Correct.
Okay.
Because this isn't just a strategy for us. This is meant to be, as you can see, some of those are council objectives or enforcement officer objectives. This is to be a center point for a bunch of other parties to also.
He makes a good point because there's a lot going on with the park, and there's a lot of suggestions about, well, you could break it up into two different elements here because both of them were highlighted in the study. One, park improvements and opportunities and walking trails, but although the village has limited space for walking trails. And the second one would be a sidewalk study and plan. Because I think with our full-time blight officer now, I don't think blight is still a high button issue because it's getting addressed on a monthly basis. And those two strategies really pop out in this study. I mean, we say fix the sidewalks, but we don't have a prioritization of that. And the gentleman was here about 3 months ago talking about the sidewalk on Jonathan that didn't complete in his subdivision. Jonathan, when you do the loop, there's probably a 600-yard stretch there where there's no sidewalk. It just ends and it's not there. And that's what he was referring to. And then all the pictures you have here. So doing a sidewalk study and implementation to extend where we can, I think would be a good priority.
Do we have a feeling of how fast we would want to jump on that? Would we want that to be a 2025?
Probably a 26 or 27.
Okay.
Start working on it, but yeah, because I think we've got a lot of stuff in the hopper over the next 2 or 3 years, which include the DPW construction of the DPW building, the St. Clair project. So we've got a lot of infrastructure stuff going on right now. So, but this way it would be highlighted out there. And if somebody, and if residents do come to us, we can say it's being looked, at least it's on the
On the roll.
spotlight now, yeah.
That's a good idea. You know,
Alright, so I'm gonna take out blight and add that sidewalk study implementation plan for 2026, because if we shy 1 year and whatnot, that's not a big deal, but we should at least start thinking about it in
does that seem to
2026.
make sense to everybody? That's a good idea, Tim. Good idea. It's also something a lot of residents can attach to too, you know.
Well, yeah, we've had concerns raised at council, and within the survey, it was raised. Caitlin's raised it, so, and it was raised at the open house. So
I mean, it's a biggie, you know, let's face it, people don't, people would like to walk, but they want to walk safely.
Well, I was telling a younger running friend of mine that 10 years ago, I was out the other day. It was snowing, it was cold, it was kind of crappy, it was slushy, and 10 years ago, I'd be like the only person out there. And I was out the other day, and there was like people older than me out power walking, slugging through it.
Yep.
And people are getting out more and being
Yep.
more active in the winter time and the summertime.
There's a lot of dog walkers too.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
there are a lot of them now.
And I think it's a good time to element to.
I think you'll see a lot more community engagement when you connect those dots.
Good.
Because I know I live in the K-Lin sub over there, and there are like 5 subdivisions just on Kidder, and they're not connected at all. So it forces people, like if you're walking from here to my sub, you have to walk up a hill where there's trees right next to the road,
Yes.
and cars can't see you. You
Yep.
can't really see cars, but you have no other option. You have to walk either in somebody's yard so it's,
We've gotten better traffic because the sidewalks that go from the park to the 2 subdivisions to the north and the McIntosh, those were only put in the last few years.
it's nice, and especially because right there you have a connection to the trail,
Yes.
which takes you right downtown.
Yep.
So you're going to have not only more community engagement in the park and all the surrounding residential areas, but also you're going to see the businesses thrive more too, because they can take their whole family bike ride downtown, whatever you want to do downtown.
Yep.
All these small businesses are going to benefit from that too. So I would definitely consider that a hot
Yeah, you're right.
priority.
So to make sure I write this down right, are we keeping the study talking about the extension of utility services, but having it get a 2029 date? So, because we're waiting for a project associated with it, or do we have
Well,
a different high precedent?
Yeah, it's still, I don't think that's something I don't think we want to take it out. Because like Gary mentioned, it is also, you know, an item down below. I guess it would be great if, you know, if we could cut everybody's water bill and add more service, that would be wonderful. But, you know, it doesn't seem like it works that way. So, but if you still have developers that come into the village and want to build something, you're still going to have to do infrastructure study to see whether or not it works.
Okay, so I'm going to do that 2029 placeholder then.
Okay.
And if it needs to be done sooner, of course, we can do it
Okay.
sooner. All right, so the next table below is several pages long, but because there were some new strategies we added when we went through our goals and objectives, there are some intentional blanks as well. So I'm going to read the ones that were intentionally blank. Otherwise, kind of as we go through, if you notice a priority that you think should be changed, kind of flag me. I'll kind of wait and let you guys read this first page.
So these were ones we have previously reviewed.
Correct.
Okay,
So they're all from the previous master plan.
okay. All from the previous master plan. Okay.
That's right.
Just out of curiosity, and I'm not sure, what were we thinking, or maybe you can't tell us, what were we thinking about this win-win opportunities with the school district?
So I think it's one of those things you don't necessarily always know until it hits you.
Okay,
Some of it is coordination just on communication. So our public engagement, did they make sure their students knew or participate with us? I would say you already have that strong relationship with the schools.
Wouldn't one of them be the liaison officer?
Correct.
Is it
Yep.
okay.
That's one of those situations as
Okay.
well. And so sometimes you have like, I'm confident you probably still have like a shared services thing. So if like their plow went down, you would use DPW's plow to help them in that situation. Things of that are just win-win situations, just to remember that they are an entity. We didn't talk about them otherwise.
Yep.
The latest hot button issue, there's talk if the field house gets implemented, that they were looking at intergovernmental entities of possibly recreational possibilities. That's just from online discussions.
Which are quite something.
So I guess, assuming everyone's more or less that read that first page, I guess that first one talking about win-wins with the school. So it's a high, medium, low priority. What would we more or less say?
I wouldn't put it as a high.
No, I put an M on it.
That's it, medium.
Yeah, medium. I would say medium would be fine.
All right, so I will do medium. Next is the library.
Those win-win opportunities. I would
say medium on that.
Yeah, I would
for
say
me.
medium with that also. I wouldn't go with a high with that one.
Next is talking about collaboration of public entities to provide a high quality of life. I mentioned transportation options, doctor offices, etc. So it's more of a blanket overall statement as opportunities arise.
If you're a
evaluate.
senior, I vote for high.
Okay.
But, we're not the minority, we're not the majority yet, but, you still might, even though, not necessarily seniors, but people, medical services and that kind of thing, a lot of people would use that, if we had doctor services here in the village, without a doubt, whether or not it's high or medium, that I leave to the group, but it's definitely something that a community needs, period, I think, anyway. So it's just.
Yeah, there's always the phrase, if you make it the most easy for the hard or the most disadvantaged of us, it makes it everyone easier. They use that a lot in disability discussions. So if you made it so that a wheelchaired person was able to utilize a path, well, then you also made it easier for a mom with a stroller. You just made it easier for a senior because there's not a step and they can shuffle if their feet shuffle or things of that nature. So.
Right, yeah, it does.
There was a vote for high. Does anyone else have a vote or want to?
Yeah,
agree?
Anybody, I don't care, whatever you want.
Yep, I'm in.
Okay, we'll do a high there. All right.
That's all
Then-
you're getting. That's all you're getting.
That's all I'm getting. Well, I hope it comes.
Next page is 12-14. There's only 2 fill-in-the-blank options that we'll discuss, but I'll give you a few minutes to kind of read over this one and see if you want to evaluate any of the other changes.
All right, your first blank, explore development of named neighborhoods to help foster a sense of sub-community identity. What does that mean?
So one of the things we had mentioned during our housing study is you don't know what the Kalen sub is if you've been here for a minute, because there is no label. So if
Everyone
you're
else
somebody,
has a sign, but we don't have a sign.
they don't have a sign.
It's
There's
kind of
other.
unfair.
that-
We have one in Westwind.
Pardon?
They
No,
don't
we
have
don't
one
have
on
a sign.
Westwind. Mm-mm.
No.
And you have some of your other traditional grid system subdivisions. So you have like around the downtown core, that doesn't really have a name. You have the north of St. Clair, where you have those two streets, Elmont Ave. That doesn't really have a collective name, is my understanding. It does have like a subdivision name,
Yeah.
but I don't. When talking with folks, everyone just says, "Oh, it's that street." It's not a neighborhood. Same thing with north of downtown. That doesn't have a neighborhood. So if you think of like, not that we are Detroit, but if you think of Mexico, if you think of, they have different enclaves of these different communities, and it helps build a neighborhood, a sense of place.
Oh,
You say north of, which one, what part are you talking about?
So there's the north
Northwest?
west side.
Northwest, that's Old Town.
Okay, I did not know that.
I don't think a lot of people knew that.
I didn't.
You're part of
Need a
the
sign.
Old Town.
That's Old Town.
They need a sign.
So I think that's the different things that I think bring that sense of place, and a lot of other communities are kind of, that's one of their things they champion sometimes, is that every subdivision has a name. And you can clearly identify that. So different, like Corktown and things of that, you have an idea of where that is, and it has an identity. So that's the same kind of thing. Again, some of this has to be a community discussion, because some of those subdivisions have HOAs, and if they want to use their funds to put up a sign, we do have the more, I guess, traditional village Old Town that doesn't, I believe, have any type of HOA, that you could potentially do some type of branding with it. Some communities do just a simple thing as changing the light posts to be a little bit more historical in nature for our classic downtown areas. So it can be little things. I don't know that we're not far enough down at the pipe, and I don't think we have disposable funding per se to just necessarily go for that. But I think that's something we can aspire to.
yeah.
So that's what I meant by that.
So that one would be more of a cooperative effort then with the people that in these different blocks.
It is most successful when it is a group grassroots approach, as opposed to I declare you are Cheez-It Town or whatever it is. It's better if it's an organic situation.
Okay, then let me throw a ringer and everything. Is it really worth having it in here as a village strategy?
I think it's
If it requires that cooperation from the group, wherever you live, is that,
Yeah, because the strategy to endorse that movement.
so it's
'Cause
just to do that?
because I think it has to start here. It's not going to organically come within like the Old Town subdivision.
Okay.
All
right.
So
I just thought I would throw that out there. Just,
Sure. So I think it's like a low priority if you were to
Yeah.
ask
I
my
have it down as a
opinion.
low.
Yeah, low, I think would work well. Not out the door, just low.
So second from the top, we just talked about the blight of structures. Do we want to change that from a high priority to something else?
Yeah,
I think we should stay on that. I
Keep it as a
that's my-
high?
Yeah, that's my.
stay on it and leave it high?
Yes.
Okay, can do. So the next blank one is begin the process to implement principles of the RRC program associated with their redevelopment plan, things of that nature. So right now we're the essentials path. I believe we have finished certification for essentials, but you could go for certification. Part of it's just a branding difference between how many things you went through to be the most development friendly. Some of it is also tied to funding, so there's more funding availability for certified communities in some ways.
So are you saying as of this point, we haven't started a process, or we have?
We have.
We have.
So we're most of the way.
So we're beyond the begin, right?
Well, so you have the implementation principles of RRC. So there's, it's a complicated program in some ways. So there's things that you establish once.
Didn't we look at that at council level?
Yes, we did.
Yeah,
We talked about,
We looked at it at council level, and didn't we make the determination that going to a certain level wasn't
Worth
the
it.
cost?
Wasn't advantageous, right?
because there's a lot of steps to it. And that's where I said, we've done the essentials route. We haven't done the top tier one. So
Would this one, I don't know, I'd probably say medium. but is that something we could put on the discussion when all three groups are together to reevaluate it? Or is it worth even doing it? Because if I remember correctly, the cost and the staff time
To do those.
to do those for what the village would get a return compared to a big city was not really worth the effort.
And the program hasn't changed since we talked about it. So I don't know that I don't think we would reevaluate.
So do we need to even have it in here?
So because it is an RRC plan, I do recommend as part of best practice that we're showing we're always working to keep implementing it.
Then I would put low for this one.
All right.
Low would be okay.
Yeah, because we talked about that thoroughly, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And that was at our joint meeting, I believe, too.
Okay, yes,
Yep.
okay.
Mhm.
That popped out. Okay.
And then we have our last page, 12-5. So there are no new actions on this page. But I'll let you have a few moments to read through it.
Oh, there is one.
Yeah, there is one.
There's one.
We
Oh.
have one.
All right. Thank you for that.
Main Street trees.
I think that's a medium as well. But that's
I
fine.
wouldn't, I don't
Just
think
the
I,
meeting with an asterisk of not allow them to grow over 5 feet.
Be a medium plus.
Split the difference.
It's gonna strategy to get rid of those triangle flower boxes.
I really liked the original trees we had.
I thought they were
Really
beautiful.
attractive. I'm sorry, I just.
I
do.
was the same way when they
When said
blossomed in the
they're all-
spring.
They're all coming out for these, never mind, it's just. But the way they were growing, they were attractive in the
Yeah.
village, they just were.
Trimmed.
All right. So with that, that is our
That's quite a
full.
report, thank you.
That's
That-
our
that
full
is- That is
plan.
excellent, it really is.
So as a reminder then, if we are comfortable then with those modifications we just talked about tonight, mostly clerical kind of fixes here and there, the next step would be is that you would consider making a motion to recommend that the village council authorize the public hearing.
I'll make a motion that the village council authorize a public hearing.
There we go, do I have a second?
Second.
Oh, I got seconds all over the place.
Who won?
Robert,
You made
Robert,
the motion.
Robert.
Okay.
Tim made and Robert seconded.
Okay.
Is there any discussion? Or have we had enough discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried.
All right, so I'll work on turning those edits around as fast as I can, give it to the village council members so you can have it with some additional time. And I'll be available for questions if council members want to call me individually or send me a separate email to help head off some of those different questions. And then I think that is it. Good. That's going to be it for the master plan for a little bit.
No kidding.
Yeah, so I don't know if we have any anticipated business in March.
Oh, come on with some.
This is my social night out.
That's it.
Caitlin, this is a very, very wonderful report. It
Okay,
really
and then
is.
just a friendly reminder again, in March, we're also going to have that other meeting, which is going to be the joint meeting, where we're going to have the training and those different topics. If you want, maybe for March, what we could do is we could just run through that as a group then. And then, so it'll be a little bit of a repeat for you guys, but it could also be a little bit of a guinea pig because I'm going to,
I think it would be helpful to everybody.
okay, because I do.
That will be the primary purpose of the joint
Yep,
meeting?
is that we'll get ready for that joint meeting.
Okay.
So, because the only slight concern I have is if we do a full run through of everything in the master plan, kind of like what we did just now, I'm a little worried on time because it's at a regular council meeting and I want to at least give them 30 minutes of their own deliberation and things. So if we're going to trend at an hour and a half, we might not be able to have that branding discussion. We may not be able to have some of the facade discussion and things. Not to say that we can't have another joint meeting the next month or something. I don't have to specifically be there. I'm happy to be there if you want me to be. I'm just worried about timing.
Yep.
Because I do think that there's a lot of good information. I think I would want to summarize the master plan just kind of how we did, pointing out the highlights of each chapter. I don't want to just say, so here's this chapter, now in the next one.
Or with 12 extra people, you're gonna start, hey, can we change this, can we change this, can we change this?
I think so. So, I'll make that, full list of what I think the content that we'll go over as a group. We can talk about it in March and then come up with a game plan on if we're going to cut some comments or content where we may do that, or see if we need to set up 2 different meetings or how we want to make modifications.
So we're looking at the 5th of March for the joint meeting, is that correct?
No.
Or- No?
I thought it was this.
That's what I have.
Is it the 5th? Unless it's changed, I think that's a Tuesday, right? We were gonna do it at a council meeting, right?
Correct.
March 5th is the first
Are we
meeting in
doing it on
March.
that one, or are we doing it on the 19th? I don't remember.
Didn't we talk about it last meeting?
We did talk about it last meeting, if we have the minutes handy.
March 5th.
Okay, so that would be problematic since our meeting is after the joint meeting.
Yeah, ours would be the 7th, right?
Right.
But, I mean, this group, do we want to get together one more time before that council joint meeting or not? Yeah, well, that's a good time to, do we need to meet once more before we have the joint meeting with council is the question. And I don't know
See an
that answer.
advantage?
I'm open to
I-
discussion with any of you. Which would we prefer to do? Are we ready to go to that meeting, or do we want to meet one more time? Because obviously Steve's not here tonight, and unfortunately, but do we want to meet one more time as a group before we go to council?
I think that'd be best.
Be a
Think
safe
so?
bet.
We don't have to.
I mean, we haven't made a lot of changes, but I just open that up for discussion, whatever everybody thinks. So council meetings would be what, 5 and 19? And we're sandwiched in on the 7th, right?
Correct. That's our standard meeting.
What do we think?
Well, the 7th and 19th.
Well, I mean, do we?
Except for the 9th, if it's set for the 5th, is notification been sent out to the other boards yet that it is the 5th? That would be the only stopper, but we're changing it to the 19th.
What would be the advantage of us postponing it 2 more weeks?
I don't know. I just opening up whether or not, are we comfortable as a group? We're ready to go?
I feel comfortable, but
Okay.
that's my
Okay.
one opinion.
All right. We're as ready as we're gonna be. I guess we're gonna have the joint meeting on the 5th.
Okay. And so probably what I'll do then is I'll talk with Dale, the interim manager, probably on content, because again, I think we really want to focus in on an hour for that discussion. So maybe he has not been on this journey with us from a master plan perspective, so he might be a good neutral party to say, okay, do you think it makes sense to, and we'll try to send it ahead of
Now,
time.
does the village's first meeting in the month, is that a heavy business meeting or not?
It always depends.
Yeah.
It all depends. Okay, all right.
Usually when we have the joint meeting, we try to
Keep it light.
Lighten the agenda?
lighten the
Okay.
agenda, Unless there's something really
Right, and I
flying
don't-
out in there.
Yeah, unless you have a major problem. I understand. All right, 5th it is.
Okay. So we'll keep it the
Joint meeting
5th.
on the 5th.
I'll coordinate with the interim village manager, Dale, to see how I can potentially keep our content to about an hour for that guided discussion, and see how we can go from there.
Now, at the end of that meeting, what are you expecting?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Nope. Because the council would have already gone to the point, well, I'm anticipating then on the February 20 meeting, they'd feel comfortable authorizing it for a public hearing.
Okay.
So I guess where I'm thinking is that we can still make changes at the public hearing. And that's easily something that we could have another joint meeting at that meeting. We could invite village council to this meeting instead if we wanted, and say, and I don't know enough until we get to that joint meeting, I think in March,
Right.
to say, but I think they've been involved. They went to the open house. We have our different cohorts that are also sharing on that board as well. So I don't think there's there's nothing dramatic changing between the different versions. I think
Right.
it's a lot of fine tuning some of these priorities. I think that would be maybe the best course action. I don't anticipate I think a lot of it's going to be based on what we found on the master plan, how fast we want to jump to other stuff.
Okay.
I think that's more going to be the interesting topic as far as branding and things. And now that we have a slogan, now what? That's something that goes beyond the master plan. And I think that's a separate topic on its own.
Very good. Are you done with us for the night?
That's all I have.
No kidding. Kim, do you have anything for us? No? How is the development of the restaurant
That was
in
going to be
town?
my question.
Of
Are
the
they
what?
getting close?
The
Of what?
development.
The old
that we-
huddles, are they getting close?
Oh,
Do we
that's
know?
not, that was not my
Oh, no,
question.
what was your?
Is the renovations of the old Huddles restaurant, is it getting close to being done? Do we know?
Yes.
It looks done. I mean,
Yes,
all the
I
tables
believe
are there and
there's gonna be
everything.
a grand opening this month.
No kidding. Oh, great. Very good.
What were you talking about?
What, the development on Research Drive, that seems to have come to a screeching halt. What's happened with that?
Yeah.
Oh, so we are waiting for revised plans still. So they still
Okay.
have the outstanding photometric plan. So we're not moving until we verify your lighting's not going to cause a nuisance. I believe engineering did come to an understanding with their party on the utility situation. And they did already accommodate the driveway movement. So it's just a matter of putting all the paperwork together and sending. As I mentioned I think it was 2 months ago, they did provide some information regarding the landscaping that made our condition clear with the existing buffering that would be maintained and things of that nature. But I'm still waiting for revised stuff. I haven't checked in with any village staff yet on, do you want me to poke them or would you guys like to poke them? I'm happy to send an email to their engineer and just
Well,
say hi.
We do actually have a public hearing on the 20th for an IFT application for that lot. So.
And
yes.
IFT is a funding.
It's as a spec building, which means nothing tax-wise. It's more of an incentive
Oh,
to sell. Basically, council is going to say, yeah, we're open to allowing an IFT there if you purchase that property.
nothing with the saddlery building, eh? Nothing.
I was talking to somebody this week and they said that he's got some projects going on the west side and they're hoping to get a crew in here sometime or refocus on it sometime probably in the spring.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Oh, good. Now we can go home. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. We are adjourned. Caitlin, great job.
Thank you.